Hey friends, welcome back to Productivity Club, the ongoing series where we discuss methods, strategies, tools that help us do more of the things that matter to us in a way that's fun and that's sustainable. Now, the problem that I've always had with time management over the last several years, and that a lot of you guys seem to have as well, is just overwhelm in terms of there is an endless list of things that I want to do, but then when I actually get down to doing them, I end up doing very few of them, or I end up taking too much on, and then I end up feeling like I don't really have the time for it. But what I've realized recently is that it's not really about time management, because all of us kind of do have the time to do stuff. And at least for me, it's not really that I don't have the time, because I could make the time, it's that I don't have the energy. One solution to this problem is to find ways to make the things that you're doing more energizing. And in a way, this is the thesis of the book that I'm writing, and I'm definitely going to be making more videos around that core idea, because I've been doing a bunch of research, looking into the scientific papers around like what is the things that give us energy. But that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is method number 2 for kind of managing our energy, and that is this idea of the energy investment portfolio. Right, so what is the energy investment portfolio? Basically, it is a glorified to-do list, or rather a glorified projects list, but I've been finding that framing it in this way really helps me at least manage my energy in a way that makes more sense. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. I use Notion for it. We've got a template linked in the video description if you want to check it out. No, they're not sponsoring this video, but like you can check it out if you want. But you can really create the system in any kind of app. You can use pen and paper, you can use journal, you can use Todoist or things, or like a number of a zillion apps that you can use for this thing. But I'm going to show you in Notion exactly what this looks like. And here is how it works. We have the energy investment portfolio, and we basically have 4 columns, or rather 3 columns, and then the second one is split up into 2. The first column is the bucket list. This is everything that I think I want to do. So Mandarin, glamping, mountain biking, wakeboarding, scuba diving, kitesurfing, bungee jumping, learn parkour, learn motorbiking, learn street hypnosis, stay in a treehouse, learn to cook, road trip USA in a van, archery, get good at acro yoga, surfing trip to Bristol, Japanese, etc, 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 etc. Then in the middle we have kind of the projects in progress, and I call these the active investments and the passive income. I like the money terminology. It's kind of fun. Feel free to call this whatever you want, but I found that this kind of taps into the sort of obsessed with money part of my personality, and I'm very familiar with like the idea of an active investment and passive income, which is why we're using this terminology. So the active investments that I'm actively investing my energy into, and this is sort of in my personal life rather than my work life. I have a work life example I'll show you in a second, but the active projects that I'm investing my energy into are at the moment 2 things. Number 1, trying to organize 2 singing lessons per week, because I really want to get better at singing. I really love musical theater singers, and I want to try and become good, and I know that getting more singing lessons with my singing teacher Josh will hopefully help with that. And I also want to make sure that every week I'm doing a podcast episode of Not Overthinking with my brother, link down below if you want to check it out. Then we have the passive income column. Now this is basically projects that are on autopilot or that someone else is taking care of. So in this case, we've got 2 projects in my personal life. The first one is that gymming 3 times a week, but this is basically on autopilot because now I've got a personal trainer. When I didn't have a personal trainer, this was very much an active investment. I had to actively invest energy and brain space and mind space and all those things, motivational force, into actually getting to the gym 3 times a week. But now that I've actually kind of outsourced that to a personal trainer, and every week he's just like, all right, what sessions are we doing? And I just have to look at my calendar and be like, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, done. In a way, that is now on autopilot. So going to the gym 3 times a week is no longer something I have to actively invest energy into. Obviously, I'm still investing energy into it when I go to the gym, but this idea of energy investment is really more about like headspace than it is about like the actual physical kilojoules or kilocalories of energy that we're investing into our specific work. And we've got another project, which is, find a new place to live, where I have somewhat delegated that to Angus, because we're trying to figure out like, can we figure out like a live work situation or find like a commercial building that I can live in as well, all that stuff. Angus is on the case, and so right now it's in the passive income category because I am not actively investing energy into it. But as soon as Angus is like, all right, here are some 5 places we have to look at, that's going to now become an active investment, and it's going to become a thing that I actively have to put time and energy into. And then we've got the completed column, which is, surf trip to Morocco, Istanbul, wedding speech, stag do, a few other random bits and bobs. But the core idea here is that this middle column, the active investment column, needs to be capped at a certain number. Now, what is that number? What is that number of active projects? A few months ago, I was trying to do a bunch of this stuff at once. I had learn Mandarin on the list. I was trying to have guitar lessons as well, get better at acoustic guitar. I was trying to have piano lessons as well, learn piano. And at the same time, I was trying to kind of dabble with music theory along with a bunch of other things. And that felt very overwhelming. It felt like, oh my God, I feel like I'm trying to do too much. Oh, also, I was also trying to have art lessons at the same time. This was sometime last year, actually. And this list was too much. I found that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 projects on this list was just too much for me to handle, and I was feeling that feeling of overwhelm and that feeling of burnout and that feeling of like, oh, what's the point of doing all this? I was getting to like my art and guitar lessons, and even though they were fun, like I'd have that feeling of, oh my God, I really can't be bothered to do this. And I recognized that whenever I have that feeling of like, oh, I can't be bothered to do this, and if I have that feeling more than like once or twice in a row and it becomes a pattern, that means I'm probably taking on too many projects. And so what I've realized over time is that the fewer things I have in the active investment column, the happier I am with life, and the more attention I can give to those things, and the more effective I feel. And having read a bunch of business books and listened to a bunch of podcasts with like CEOs and billionaires and startup founders and stuff, they all basically say that like limit your number of projects in progress. And so learning Mandarin is now back on the bucket list. It's something I'm not going to take seriously in this season of life. Similarly, guitar, piano, music theory, art lessons, these are all things I want to do at some point, but I know that in this current season of life, that's not actually going to be helping me because it's going to lead to this overwhelm and lead to this feeling of burnout. Now that tends to beg the question for like, how many projects should you have going at a given moment? And I think this is going to vary for different people. I've been speaking to basically everyone I know about this over the last several months. I think the number is basically 5 plus or minus 2. So somewhere between 3 and 7 seems to be around about the number that seems to be reasonable for most people. Coincidentally, this is, if you look into the research behind working memory, this is how many chunks of information we can hold in our working memory, in the random access memory, the RAM of our brain. It's how many chunks of information we can hold at a given moment. So for example, when they do studies where they ask people to memorize bits of numbers, generally people can memorize 5 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. And I think that seems to be roundabout accurate for this active investment stuff as well. Usually people I've spoken to, and if I think of myself, when I've got like more than 7 projects on the go, it feels like I'm completely scattered and I'm gonna kind of burn out doing those things. Whereas when I have less than that, it feels much more manageable. And basically the smaller this number is, like I only really need to put my kind of personal life effort into these 2 or 3 extra things each week. That then starts to feel really good. I do have a separate work one where I kind of think about projects on the work list, but that's like a side point. We're focusing on the personal one here. And I think this is sort of like a Dunbar number. So Dunbar number that you might have heard of is like the number of kind of people we can have kind of close relationships with at a given time. I think we have a Dunbar number for active projects, and I think that number is 5 plus or minus 2. Now, a few other things to mention about this. So why is it called an energy investment portfolio? Firstly, because I like the finance terminology and I think it's just kind of fun to think of it in those terms. But secondly, it's an energy investment portfolio because just like we think of investing our money into assets that compound, like the stock market or Bitcoin, not right now, or like real estate, which will hopefully compound over time, we can also think of investing our energy into projects that compound. So for example, a lot of the things on this list are skills and habits. So I know that to get better at singing, I just need to consistently show up to singing lessons, and hopefully that will compound over time and I'll be able to then be a good singer or be a way better singer than I currently am with the compounding growth. And that's why I'm thinking of this as an investment portfolio. Like, what are the projects I'm investing energy and time and attention into, because I am investing in those things and I'm hoping that they will have a return further down the line. There are some projects, my surfing trip to Morocco, generally things that are trips or one-off projects where there's no compounding returns on those. That's sort of the equivalent of kind of buying a property, doing it up and then selling it, where you're not really benefiting from compounding there, but it is still an investment in that you're investing into this thing so that you can do this thing and gain a return from it, even though it's a one-off return. And the surf trip to Morocco was sick. The trip to Istanbul was sick. And so I like to put, like, when I'm organizing something big, into the active investment thing as well, because organizing 3 holidays at a time is actually too overwhelming and I can't do it. But I know that if, every month or so I'm trying to organize something new, I'll just chuck it into the active investment list, and then in my mind I'll know, oh, okay, this is what I'm organizing. And then once it's done, once it's been organized, so let's say, for example, my next trip is wakeboarding trip to Bali, and I can give it a little type of trip just for fun. While I'm still organizing it, I'll often put it over here, needs organizing. Then, conveniently in Notion, I can use the Notion card feature to put in details of the trip. And I can do all the things on Notion. I've made zillions of videos about Notion, so you can check those out if you're not familiar with Notion. And then once the trip is organized, I'll chuck it in passive income because now I don't need to do any work for it anymore, so it's just kind of passive. Doesn't quite work with the idea of passive income, but you get what I mean. And then when the trip's done, it'll just go into completed. So then I'll know that, okay, cool. I now currently, like right now, I'm not in the process of organizing a major trip. And I know I have space in my brain to organize a major trip. So now I'll be thinking, okay, cool. I think a mountain biking trip would be quite fun. Cool, let's just find a date in the diary and organize it and invite some friends to it. And this kind of attitude has actually made me take a lot more trips over the last few months than I've taken before, because now I know that sort of trip organizing is an investment I could make, and when that slot is empty, it feels great because it means I can just organize the next one. And just to speak to something my English teacher used to say back in school, the secret to happiness is to have something to do, someone to love, and something to look forward to. And so in this case, these trips are the something to look forward to that I have. and the rest of the stuff, especially the work stuff, is the something to do, and we'll talk more about someone to love in a later video. Now, if you're having a look at this Notion template and you're thinking that sounds interesting, but you're thinking you might want to potentially try and use Notion to build this or anything else for yourself, you might like to check out my brand new class on Skillshare, which is all about Notion for beginners and how to maximize your productivity using Notion. And thank you, Skillshare, so much for sponsoring this video. If you haven't heard by now, Skillshare is the world's best platform for learning basically anything on the internet. They've got thousands and thousands of classes on all sorts of topics, from entrepreneurship to business to interior design to cooking to music theory, loads of stuff. But the best thing about Skillshare is that I've been personally teaching classes on Skillshare since 2019, and now I've got around a dozen classes on Skillshare, including my brand new one, which we've literally just finished filming with this fancy ass setup that we've got here, all about how to use Notion for beginners. In the class, we're going to go over all of the details around beginner, intermediate, advanced Notion, how to use pages and blocks and databases and relations and embeds and widgets and all that cool stuff that Notion can do. And so if you haven't gotten started with using Notion yet, or even if you have, you might like to check out the class, which you can do by hitting the link in the video description, which will give you a totally free 30-day free trial to Skillshare. And then during the free trial, you're more than welcome to watch any and all of my classes. I've got this Notion class. I've got 3 classes themed around productivity that are super popular. I've got one newer-ish one, which is all about how to get started with YouTube for beginners, if you're interested in potentially starting your own YouTube channel and getting a slice of that YouTube revenue pie. And then you can browse all of the other classes on Skillshare to your heart's content. So thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. And if you'd like to sign up, then check out the link in the video description. If you're one of the first 1,000 people to hit that link, you will get the free 30-day trial. So thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring the video. Let's get on with the video. Final thing to mention on this front, you will notice that none of these are particularly smart. You might be familiar with like the paradigm of goal setting called SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, or something like that. And technically, you know, learn music theory is not a very good goal, right? Because like, how will I know when I've learned music theory? People would normally say that to make that an effective goal, you should say, pass the grade 8 ABRSM exam in music theory by this date, and then that becomes achievable and measurable and time-bound and all that stuff. But to be honest, I have never really vibed with that type of goal setting. What I generally prefer to do is just have a very rough idea of like, okay, these are the broad projects I'm working on. I know in my own mind why I'm working on them. I know that they're going to be connected to things I actually care about, which is why they're on the list. But I don't need to try and build a complex system that kind of takes the joy out of working on this stuff. I know that some people love this. You know, my friend August Bradley has an incredible YouTube channel where he goes in depth about like going ham on all these complex Notion features, and he loves being able to connect every single project in his life to some kind of wider goal. And I find that incredibly inspiring, but I've tried that system, and I find that generally, whenever I have complexity in a system, complexity reduces my creativity and reduces my productivity and reduces my enjoyment of life. So these are all deliberately vague, because the point of this isn't so that I have like a surefire complex system of working towards any goals. The point is that so I can keep track of like, am I doing too many things? Because that's always a risk. In anyone's life that I've ever spoken to, the risk is not, am I doing too little? It tends to be, am I doing too much? Especially for people who are ambitious, which tends to really only be the sorts of people I speak to. And I found that over time, the fewer projects I have in active investments, like generally less than 5, ideally less than 3, the less likely I am to burn out, and the more likely I am to enjoy the journey while it being sustainable. Right, so how else can you use this energy investment portfolio? The other thing to think about is with active investments, you have to be actively putting some amount of effort into them. And so again, I don't like complexity, but the thing I ask myself when I look at this is, what progress can I make on this thing this week? Just this week. I don't think in terms of this month or this quarter or anything like that. I'm not making a whole list of actions that are required in this project. I'm just thinking, okay, what progress can I make on this week? People like to make long lists of action points. I've tried this. I've tried every productivity method under the sun, where you have a project and you break it down into the 50 different steps that it's going to take, and you tick off one at a time. But I always found with those, at least for me, that just writing down those steps was its own exercise in procrastination. And once I'd written down all the steps, I kind of lost interest in the project, because it's just like, oh, okay, now I actually have to do the work. Whereas I find that when I just take it a day at a time or a week at a time and just think only what is the next action, that just makes me make so much more progress on anything than worrying about the whole shebang list of steps. Final tip when it comes to this stuff is that I generally find it super helpful to really kind of try and monitor my own energy levels when it comes to these sorts of projects. And over time, I've started to recognize the feeling of, when I feel like a project is draining my energy. So for example, when I have art lessons, and I was having art lessons three days a week, and I found that they were draining my energy rather than energizing me. Usually that is a sign that something is off. And I recognize that feeling of like, ugh, this feels a bit draining. Try and figure out, okay, what's off about this? And then sometimes the answer is to scrap the project and put it back to the bucket list. Sometimes the answer is to delete it altogether because I've realized I actually don't care about taking art lessons anymore. Or sometimes the answer is, okay, let me figure out a way to make this a bit more fun, a bit more energizing. And I guess overall, the meta point behind this video and why I love this way of thinking about time management compared to what I used to before. This is something Oliver Burkeman talks about in his book 4,000 Weeks. Basically, the idea is that actually time is finite, energy is finite. Like, we cannot do all the things. And as much as productivity gurus like me might peddle the narrative that actually you can have it all, and as long as you are efficient with your time, you too can build a side hustle and learn the language and start a YouTube channel and like have a healthy relationship and like work for 60 hours a week. Like, that narrative is a little bit old. I don't think I ever used to peddle that narrative, but like, people had the vibe that, oh my God, Ali, you must be a machine, you must be so efficient all the time. And I always used to be a bit surprised by that. And my friends would be surprised because they'd be like, they'd see me and they'd see that I waste so much time, and they'd be wondering why the internet considers me some sort of productivity guru. The thing that clicked for me when I read 4,000 Weeks and when I interviewed Oliver Burkeman on my podcast is this idea of embracing finitude, embracing the fact that we cannot do it all. I just suck at replying to WhatsApp messages. I'm never going to be able to reply to all of my friends. And rather than feel bad about it and think, oh, if only I was more efficient on the toilet, I'd be able to reply to messages, I just think, you know what, it's fine. Some friends will go without a reply, and I'm okay with that. And I'm sad to be disappointing them, but ultimately I'm okay with it because my time and my energy is finite and I can only do certain things. So for example, replying to friends' WhatsApp messages within an hour is not on the list of active investments, although for some of my friends, they really value that. They see it as a big priority in their life, and therefore they tend to do more of it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, you might like to check out my book summary of 4,000 Weeks, which is going to be linked over there. That is Time and How to Use It. It's the most kind of philosophical take on time management and productivity that I've read in recent years. And over there, you can find my interview with Oliver Burkeman on the Deep Dive podcast, where we explore the topic in depth. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.